If you like the video, please consider supporting me on Patreon. Welcome back, guys. We are now testing our controller here. And I would have gotten this done a lot sooner. However, I had to fix quite a few things and take care of some stuff around the house. So, apologies if you were waiting on me to actually test this, see if it works. And at first, it didn't work. And it wasn't anything that we did maintenance-wise. Well, actually, it was a maintenance deal, but it wasn't anything we added. It wasn't the conductive paint. It wasn't the lubrication to the system. It was actually cleaning corrosion that had broken a part of the system I didn't test when I put it all back together. I put it all back together, made sure it booted up, loaded games, and it was great, so I didn't think nothing of it. And actually, what had happened was I cleaned corrosion off the ribbon cable, which at the end kind of has like an edge connector. I cleaned the corrosion off the pins because it was so bad I wasn't even sure how it was working. So, all in all, corrosion pushed the pins out of its working tolerance, and leaving the corrosion on actually pushed the connector tighter. Therefore, it made the controllers work. When I cleaned that left a gap in the tolerance, so didn't work. I thought I'd left something unplugged till I took everything apart and I seen, oh wait, I cleaned that part. It's got to be something with that. So I booted it up with the top off, wiggled the connector, and hey, suddenly it said I had a controller. So simple fix on that. Just threw some electrical tape on the back side of it, wedged it back in. We're all up and running again. Now, so far, everything works just fine. Playing with the triggers, so to speak, there. The only thing that I don't like about this is one of those games that probably would work out best with analog, but the whole point was dealing with the digital inputs and the membrane pads and all that, so kind of forcing myself to use this here. Now, can I tell conductive paint is on there? No. It just feels like a regular controller. I can tell a difference between this and the foil tape that I used previously, as the foil tape took a little bit of the gap away between the button and the pad. And you can definitely notice it a little bit if you're like me, and most people probably wouldn't notice it. They just figure that's how the controller was. But with the conductive paints, I can't tell it's in there. I can't even tell I put lubrication in the controller, which really wasn't lubricating. It was just more of trying to keep the rubber healthy and lasting a little longer. But all in all, same responsiveness. The only thing is I have to play with it a while to see, will it actually come off of our pads, because it never really was intended to be put on a membrane pad. And acrylics generally dry up hard, brittle, they're not flexible. And so I need to abuse it quite a bit, so to speak, to try and get it to come off if it's going to come off. That way we can see where the weak point is, which I've already thought about some different solutions. I've actually thought about how I could mix with other ingredients to give it more of a rubber compound, but at the same time I have to figure out the ratio, because if I dilute it too much, we lose our conductivity. But if I don't make it rubbery enough, then it could just end up being as brittle as before. So it's definitely, I have to play with ratios and figure out what's going to work, what wouldn't work. But for now, it seems fine, other than this game is kind of scratched, so I think that's why I'm seeing what issues I do see in the game itself. But I can't really complain. I paid $2 for the game. At the time, it looked pretty good. And I actually liked Driver 2 when it came out, simply because I could get out of a car, go nab another car. All's great in the world. As far as differences, I don't see any sort of a difference between any of the paints. I know I said I was mixing them around. That way different games using different buttons would get plenty of use. Let's see, let me actually... Oh gosh, there goes everything. Let's see, X was carbon. X is just fine. Been using left and right a lot, so that's nickel and silver. But yeah, everything seems just fine, so for our purposes, I don't think there's a huge difference as far as connecting. So I think the difference is going to come down to how well each one sticks on. Which I think next video I will probably pop this apart after playing a little bit more with it. And that's all stuff I'll do off camera. But other than that, rather pleased with the result. It's just, we do need to figure out durability, I suppose, would be the appropriate term. But as far as connectivity is just fine. I don't notice that the mod was done. Of course, it probably would have been better tested on, say, like a Super Nintendo or a Genesis, something, you know, probably 16-bit era, maybe even an NES, or even a Master System. Master System just, I don't know, it's just not a great controller. Particularly the D-pad. But working with whatever I found from thrifting. Now, as far as Q&A goes, I did get a couple questions. The first one was, how did I learn anything about electronics? And I think that kind of goes into why leads into how, and the why was my parents weren't going to pay for any of this, so if I broke it, well, TS, you'll just have to wait and it might get replaced. If I wanted, say, a mod chip, so I know when I was about junior high, high school age, you started seeing mod chips for systems. Like PS1 had mod chips, play burnt games or imports. Dreamcast had one that basically made it region free, I believe. And then when the PS2 came out, I kept up on mod chips for those. So anything like that, it was very unlikely that my parents would give me the money to have someone put the chip in, because they figured spent all this money on the system, now you want to modify it and let essentially a stranger go in and mess it up, and then they're not going to replace it if they actually did break it. So it was kind of a necessity. And then from there, it was a lot of checking around online, looking at stuff, and then practicing. Now, I didn't just grab a brand new game system and some hardware and say, oh, I'm going to modify this, because that's not the brightest thing to do when you're a novice. So I would find projects that required stuff like soldering and laying out a board design. And a lot of the stuff I did didn't even have a design. You just got the schematics of, well, here's kind of how everything has to hook up. You got to figure out your own layout. So I pretty much went from there. And eventually, when I started having my own money to do what I wanted with, I figured, well, I've gotten this far on just figuring out and doing it myself, so from there, if I want anything done, I wasn't going to pay someone else to do it. I figured if it is feasible by human hands, then I will definitely do it. And then there was a lot of experimentation, a lot of stuff people said that just isn't going to work, and I figured, whatever, I've got the time, I'm going to play with it anyway. And so I ended up with something that people would look at and say, I don't know how this works, but it shouldn't work, because all the documentation says it should not work. So I've had a lot of fun with it from there. And then another question that I had was, why am I starting a channel and making videos? And that's simply because any of those fun projects I did, if I tell 10 people about it, those 10 people have different understandings of what I'm talking about. So I have to essentially explain it 10 times. So I have to explain it so each person understands it, and then I get into what I did, why I did it, what's the benefits, all that fun stuff. So I figured, well, if I make a video, there's visual representation I can explain what I'm doing, why I'm doing it, and I don't have to ever explain it again. I can just say, here, just watch the video, and I explain what I did, and you get to see me doing what I did. Other than that, I think, community input can be a positive thing. I have had people, talk theories about stuff, and people say, yeah, you should do this, or you should do that, and it's, well, if I think about it, I might do it. But, it's one of those things, I'll do it if I think about it, if I feel like it. And the great thing about doing stuff online is if I start getting support through Patreon and whatnot, I can take suggestions and say, well, I've never done that, I've never really had a desire, but I get requests for it, so what the hell, let's go ahead and do it. And I think really that's all I have to cover today, other than putting some time on this controller and essentially seeing if we can make it fail. I'm sure it would fail over a long period of time, but if it doesn't fail in a short term, then it would probably last a while. But for the moment, everything looks fine. So I think next time, I don't know if I'm going to make a video. It will probably be a very short video. If I take this apart, it may only be a couple minutes long. Take it apart, check out the pads. I'll try to get a good, decent close-up, maybe poke at them a little bit, or do some scratching, because it's supposed to be scratch resistant, and I figured if I lightly scratch it, it should be fine. Not, leaving an actual mark, but a little light scraping, a little love there. And see, is it peeling, or, is it doing as it said? Is there any cracks in it? And then after that point, I think I'm just going to figure out different options to change the formula a little bit. I've looked into, should I go with latex, or should I go, or a silicone, something like that. And I know you can get silicone in like sealing caulk and whatnot, but there's kind of different formulas with that even, because you can get some that's super stretchy and rubbery, which sounds great, but then you can go with, well, this is white, this is clear, and those tend to actually cure a little different. I've noticed that if you go with a translucent, it seems to be more rubbery. And I think we just hit a scratch on this disc. But yeah, there's a lot of testing to do, and I have to see which ones I'm going to play with and keep it within a budget. And other than that, that's it for today. I don't want to make this go any longer. I mainly just wanted to do some place testing, show everything's working, my opinions on it, and answer to a couple questions I did have. And for the record, I was using this controller the entire time, because it is the only controller I have on hand. But, of course, if you would like to help out and increase the budget so we can do more projects, play with more stuff, definitely check out my Patreon. And if you like what I'm doing so far, definitely, like and subscribe. But if you're sick of seeing PlayStation, I understand. This is just one of those deals. I picked it up for about $10. I have about a dozen games I got for about $2 each. And it's not even my primary PlayStation. I have no sentimental attachment to it, so if it breaks, it was kind of a whatever deal. But it's good for demonstration, and it was pretty nasty, if you noticed in previous videos. So, perfect demo model. And then, of course, I have my tiny TV there. But I'm going to leave it at that, guys, and catch you next time.